Well, welcome everyone. We are glad that you could join us for this month's edition of Lunch and Learn. We are happy to have with us today the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments, which provides regional leadership for broadband projects in Southwest Colorado, surrounding counties, municipalities, and our two tribes, the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. The Southwest Council of Governments Executive Director is with us today. She'll be presenting on broadband initiatives in the Southwest Colorado and surrounding areas. From the first project in 2009, Southwest Colorado Access Network scan to the current projects and the initiatives that they've got going on. We want to just remind you before we get started is that we have the Lunch and Learn series. It is available every month. We try to keep subjects in front of you that we think you're going to want to know and understand. We use this also as just a way so that we can all kind of understand what everyone is doing in our various parts of the state, so that we can all work together and we can come up with solutions that'll give us the most robust broadband infrastructure that we can provide. Want to let you know that the Colorado Broadband Office is always here to assist you if you have any needs or concerns. But it's a value for us to go ahead and get right into it and let our speaker go ahead and start the presentation. We will start on time, we will end on time, but if the session goes long, we will have a breakout session afterwards. And excuse me as I am admitting a lot of folks in here. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, I consider her a good friend, Miriam. I'm going to let you go ahead, introduce yourself, and go ahead and tell us what you're doing with the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for that. There's lots of things I wanted to say and, tease you about, but not right now since we're live. So I'm Miriam Gillow-Wiles. I have, if we're going to go with Scrabble, I have 42 as is my score, my Scrabble title. I like to make fun of my very long last name. And usually I'm the winner of longest name and title in the room, unless Nate's here, then he wins. So I'm also not going to take your entire hour talking about broadband, even though I probably could. I want this to be conversational and informative, and so ask questions, please. So, SWCOG is a regional entity. We cover 5 counties in Southwest Colorado. We work on a variety of things: transit, transportation, recycling, housing, economic diversification, remote work readiness, part of that, and of course, like we're going to talk about today, broadband. So we do more than just broadband, even though some days it feels like all I do is talk about it. So I want to give everybody a little orientation. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Most of you have probably heard of Durango. That's down here in the center of the region, roughly. But this is the 5 counties: Dolores, Montezuma, La Plata, Archuleta, and San Juan. We have 10 municipalities in those areas, and we have the 2 Indian tribes, the Southern Ute Indian Tribe and the Ute Mountain Ute Indian Tribe. This is the Four Corners area of the world. There is a little less than 100,000 people in these 5 counties, which gives us, and over 6,500 square miles gives us about 15 people per square mile. We are not a high density area. In fact, 2 of these counties have 2 people or less per square mile. Part of this is because we have 85% public lands. You can see from the topographic profile that there's a couple of mountains around here. But we also have really close ties with New Mexico to the south, Arizona to the southwest, and Utah to our west. You can tell because am I getting the feedback? There we go, that's better. So on the border area, a lot of our services crossed boundaries, including our roads, our education systems, our healthcare, connectivity, employment, housing, the list goes on and on. So this is where we're at, kind of far away. So a quick overview, the history of the COG, and it actually really is very much based in broadband. So in 2009, the IGA that formed the COG, and for those of you, I'm going to try not to use too much acronyms, but IGA is Intergovernmental Agreement that formed the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments. From that, we were awarded, that was done because of the desire and need to work on broadband and funding that could be available. So in 2010, we received $3 million from the state of Colorado and matched that with a little over $1 million of local funding and built the Southwest Colorado Access Network, or SCAN. And SCAN was initially, ideally, it was to try to connect the communities to one another, realizing that $4 million is not enough money to do that in an area of such large or low population between communities, that it became a let's build it so all of our community anchor institutions have connectivity. At that point in time, most of the communities didn't even have fiber in their jurisdictions. So except for the city of Durango and the city of Cortez, the other municipalities such as Mancos and Dolores and and Pagosa Springs, Rico, Dove Creek, they did not have, Ignacio Bayfield did not have any fiber optics within their communities. So this was a groundbreaking endeavor to build fiber optics to connect our town halls, our police stations, our fire stations, things like that. And this was also the first regional broadband project of the state of Colorado. This was going on at the same time as EagleNet, which is everybody's favorite favorite word that starts with E. And that was in conjunction with the SCAN, EagleNet was supposed to be building that middle mile section. Well, we all know what happened with EagleNet and the fact that when they got to this part of the world, because it is challenging to get here, and this is the history of broadband in Southwest Colorado, is that they ran out of money. And so we didn't get the middle mile built by EagleNet that we were promised. In fact, the senator's office Senator Bennett's office had to actually request that the Department of Commerce and TIA open their funding back up to build Silverton, because at that time, San Juan County was the only county seat. Silverton, which is the county seat of San Juan County, was the only county seat that did not have fiber. And so that happened in 2015, I believe. So in 2013, they hired a staff member to drive this bus. That would be me. I'm the very first employee of the Southwest COG and the longest serving. So and then during this time, so once we finished the SCAN, there was a little bit of broadband fatigue. It took a lot of effort and a lot of work during those 4 years. So shortly after I was hired, the board really wanted to do something besides broadband, which is great. We had other things to do, like transit and transportation, recycling, serving as a fiscal agent for a number of small entities. And then we realized that just because we did one broadband project does not mean broadband was done, and we all had connectivity and it was rainbows and unicorns. So in 2015, we did a regional broadband plan, which was funded by DOLA. And since then, we have been working and chipping away at developing that plan, making it a reality, finding funding, partnering, things like that. So the history of the COG is intertwined with broadband in Southwest Colorado. We can't sever the two. So I like to go to this slide because this really highlights the reality of broadband in Southwest Colorado that we know to be true versus what is reported. And this is from Microsoft. So in this area, I've highlighted, this is their little Four Corners area of the world. This right here is La Plata County in the city of Durango. And it says that we have 60 to 80% have coverage of the 25x3 broadband speeds. Well, anybody who's ever lived here or even visited here and tried to use the internet knows that that's really probably not true. The neighboring county is Montezuma, says the same thing. That's where City of Cortez is the county seat there. In reality, or what Microsoft reports, which is much closer to reality than the FCC reporting, is here's La Plata County, and we're in that 20 to 40% range while Montezuma County and the city of Cortez are in that 0 to 20% range, which means that only 20% of the people that live in Montezuma County, or of the 25,000 people that live there, have actual broadband speeds. So I like to use this to just highlight and give us all a basis of reality out here. So those challenges that keep us from having broadband are funding, which is a big challenge, of course, because it's, you know, a $70 million middle mile build, give or take, on a good day in the spring when I don't have snow. So that's a large chunk of change. Federal funds, until very recently, because of the pandemic, have really been geared towards the private sector and not the public sector middle mile build out. There's lots of money for last mile to do fiber to the premise. There's some funding to do wireless for healthcare, things like that, but it's not really geared towards middle mile for the public sector to do. There's also state funding, but DOLA has $5 million a year for broadband. I could use all of that and not even connect to communities. There's also funding through DORA, but that's last mile to be able to build to the communities, or the fiber to the premise, or high-speed wireless to the premise. And none of that's enough money. And with the 100,000 people that live here, or a little less, we can't possibly raise taxes to be able to cover that $70 million hole. And that's just the middle mile. That's not the last mile connections. Because of our population density, or lack of population density, the connection to get from a middle mile to the last mile can be very costly in some cases. So it's not a problem that we can solve locally. It's not a problem the state can only solve, and it's not a problem the feds have had the funding to solve until recently. The pandemic has changed that a little bit. There's reporting, and that's what that last slide was. The FCC 477 data is all sorts of wrong. We work with OIT to get better data out here to run speed tests, so we have an idea of what's actually going on and what changes are being made when infrastructure does go in. Then there's all the fun federal agencies, the alphabet soup of different funding sources and different regulations and different requirements for each funding source. And those are in non-alphabetical order: USDA, FCC, the NTIA, the EDA, DHS, that's Department of Homeland Security, and FEMA. All have various pots of funding for broadband in some capacity, but they're all different rules. So it makes it hard to navigate all of that, to find funding. And then there's all the federal legislation and state legislation that inhibits or supports broadband development, which creates challenges to also navigate. So those are some of the challenges. These are some of our other challenges. These are the pretty pictures, at least. We have dozens of mountains over 13,000 feet. We have canyons. We have very few roads in and out of the region. In fact, there's 4 ways out: north, south, east, west, and that's it. There are electric utility poles run through a lot of public lands, which makes it much more difficult to permit those utility poles for commercial broadband services. There's almost no right-of-way on some of our rural roads because they're so narrow. We have really long distances between communities. So I put an average of about 13,000 miles on my car a year just in the region, driving around to the communities. So I can drive from one end to the other, and it can take 3.5 hours, which is the same amount of time it takes me to get to Albuquerque, just to give you some relation. There's a lot of challenging weather, like you can see behind me. That we get snow early, we have short build seasons. Oh yeah, and we have really hard rock in some of these areas, which makes it very difficult to bore anything. And there's almost no return on investment for this middle mile build from the private sector. And that's because it just costs so darn much. And on top of that, like we have here at Mesa Verde, we have a lot of cultural heritage that we have to maintain. So every time we do have to disturb the ground, we want to make sure we maintain anything that we find. And it takes more effort and more money to do all that work. So it's a beautiful place to live. It's an amazing place to live. It creates some challenges with infrastructure. So what we've been working on over the years, since 2009, is a lot. So that's a scan, the Colorado Southwest Colorado Access Network. And after that, we worked on the opt-out elections from SB 152 to help the jurisdictions opt out. We've had successful elections out here the entire time. And we actually have one happening this year with the city of Cortez. They are opting out, even though they're the only community that was grandfathered into 152, just to make sure that they can actually serve the community in the way they want to. That's when we also did a regional broadband plan. And since then, we started doing planning and engineering, and we're working on an aggregation of services, though not as robust as Project Thor, because we just don't have the infrastructure for that, though our governments can purchase at various pricing with ISPs through the COG. Our engineering and planning is mostly on our roads, and our only roads in the area are CDOT roads, the various state highways, and that's to engineer between the communities so we can figure out how to get better connectivity, broadband, fiber, lower costs of internet to our communities. It also goes outside of our region up into Telluride, because San Miguel County and is very close to our region, and we need to create interoperability across the regions. It's great if I can build broadband, or the ISPs can support broadband, and we build it out here, but if we don't cross those jurisdictional lines, it doesn't create redundancy, it doesn't create abundant connectivity, and it doesn't necessarily bring the price down for our consumers. So speaking of working across state lines, we started working with San Juan County, New Mexico on a number of broadband projects, because a lot of our services, like I mentioned earlier, are related to one another. And one of those is most of our internet service comes from Albuquerque. So it comes up through San Juan County, New Mexico. And for those of you, that is city of Farmington is the major municipality there, while the city of Aztec is the county seat. You can see here, we have the crosshatches here represent the various tribal reservations and nations that we work with. This is Ute Mountain Ute, Southern Ute in purple, and this is the Navajo Nation in blue. So we're right on the corner of Indian country, which makes broadband development even more challenging because the population densities drop off even more significantly when we work across those sovereign nations. So what we've been working on most recently is developing this, what we're calling the Southern Loop. And that's from Cortez to Shiprock, which is on the Navajo Nation, Farmington, Aztec, back up to Durango, and then connecting Durango and Cortez as well. So there isn't a complete fiber route between Durango and Cortez. This will give us internal redundancy to much of our communities on the west side of the region, and will help support both the Southern Ute tribe and the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. So more broadband projects is that southern route, that Cortez, Toyac, Shiprock, Farmington, Aztec, Durango, Cortez. We've been working on USAC requests to help support our rural healthcare providers. The SWCOG is actually a consortium of rural healthcare providers. We're working with some private providers and investment opportunities in our opportunity and enterprise zones across the region. We've been working very closely with Silverton and San Miguel Power and Electric and San Juan County and to develop redundancy to get to Silverton. Silverton is very challenging to get to. It's high alpine environment, it's narrow roads, all mountains, fun things like that make broadband really easy to do. We're working with CDOT and Arcadian Infracom across Wolf Creek Pass to ensure that funding is available there and that the pass gets built, because that's one of our other routes of redundancy. Also, I believe some of that routes are tens of thousands of dollars a mile because of the terrain and the material they have to bore through. And then we're working with the Ute tribe on EDA funding to develop this section from Cortez to roughly here, which is where the entrance to Toyoak is, to build this so we can start to then build the south part and create that redundancy. So I'm talking a whole lot, and I hope there are many, many interesting questions coming up. So one of the other things we work on is advocacy. So what became apparent very early on is that we can't build this house if we don't have, if you will, if we don't have a solid foundation. And that a lot of that foundation comes from the rules and requirements and abilities or inabilities for us to solve our own problems as a region or as local governments and communities and counties. So that means we have to be engaged with the state and federal legislation to ensure that we advocate for our needs, good, bad, or ugly, with those entities. It also has to do with a lot of education, is ensuring that our elected officials are educated here locally. So when they talk with our state and federal representatives and senators, as well as various different departments at the state or federal government, they are using the same terminology and they understand it. And that has helped tremendously to be able to make decisions at the SWCOG, because my board is an educated board when it comes to broadband. They can speak the same language generally. We've been really engaged lately and tracking a lot of the FCC rulemaking that happened over the last year and a half, including some of the preemptions of rights-of-ways and preemptions of historic districts and 5G challenges that have been laid upon the local governments and reduced our ability to control our own communities. So we're really paying attention to that because it does have a reduction of local control. And so, all right, we got all these challenges. Great, then what? Like, it's very doom and gloomy sometimes. So I try to think about, what are we doing? What can we do next? How do we fix this? So some of the next steps is making sure that all of the jurisdictions and the counties have broadband friendly policies. That's dig once policies. So if somebody's going to start to dig up a roadway, maybe that's Atmos gas, maybe it's the water utility, that we're putting in conduit to go with it, to make sure that we eventually start to create networks within our communities. We need to expand our middle mile broadband, working with the private providers to do that, working with the jurisdictions, with the state, with other states, with the tribes, connecting the remaining government facilities that were not connected through SCAN. There are a few water tanks or road and bridge shops that are more outlying that are not connected. And that includes some of the schools, because in a really rural area, you get schools in really rural places, and they don't always have broadband. And that's a problem. I think we've all seen that really very much lately. Encouraging and supporting and working with our public-private partnerships and various collaboration, communication with our ISPs, trying to come up with creative ideas to solve things. And continuing our partnerships with the various state departments, with our elected officials. And that includes the broadband office, CDOT, DOLA, obviously, our Archuleta broadband office, the state of New Mexico and San Juan County, city of Farmington, city of Aztec. Lots of nonprofits, our citizens, so we can keep them educated and apprised of what's going on and why when they call me, they understand they don't have very good internet. Our school districts, we've been working very closely with our school districts to try to get some of their students connectivity, as well as encouraging the school districts to support their students in various connectivity options. There's a school district in Dallas that has actually been putting up towers to serve their students. And so we're having those conversations here, like, how does that work? Can we do that? As well as our partners with Southern Ute Indian Tribe, Ute Mountain Ute Indian Tribe, and all the other entities and agencies that I work with, including the COG board members. It's a lot. I have a lot of acronyms in my head. So that is the super exciting Southwest Colorado broadband presentation, and I would be more than happy to answer questions. Also, my contact information is on your screen, so if you want to ask me questions and don't want to do it in a public forum, feel free to email or call me.
So we'd like to go ahead and at this time, let's open it up. Does anyone have any questions for Miriam about the important work that she and everyone she works with is doing down in the southwest corner of the state?
Oh, there's a question from a person up in Rico, which is actually in Southwest Colorado, though very much on the edge. It's up between the town of Dolores and Telluride, for those of you, just to orient everybody. Yeah, Rico's been really hard to serve. It's in a narrow canyon, so it's hard to do a wireless solution. And there are 3 different owners of fiber between Telluride and Dolores to be able to provide any connectivity. And that makes it extra challenging. Plus it is very expensive to build there. So yes, there are plans. Alan, if you want to email me, we can chat a little bit more in detail about Rico, or call me, either way, that'd be great.
Hey, Miriam, it's Antonio. So my question would be based on the loop going through Silverton. In fact, my family used to own a restaurant in Silverton and know the area well, know the $1 Million Highway, and know it's really difficult to close that loop up. Do you know anything about the plans to get that finished, both coming in from the north as well as the Durango loop?
So the plan, the build from the south, which was EagleNet, was never actually completed. So what happened is they hung fiber aerially on the tri-state poles from Purgatory Mountain Resort, roughly Purgatory Mountain Resort, to Silverton. That was done in conjunction with CenturyLink. So there's an IRU from EagleNet and CenturyLink, and then also an agreement with Tri-State to put the fiber there. And then as they were supposed to be building from Purgatory to Durango, what the contractors for EagleNet did is every time they hit bedrock, they were boring it in the right way. Every time they hit bedrock, they would skip that section and then continue down the mountain. Well, that left 22 discontiguous sections of conduit that are still there and not being utilized. And it's unsure if they were capped, so I do not know the condition of that conduit. So there isn't really, so because that was never finished, what happened is that EagleNet signed an agreement with CenturyLink to use their fiber that runs parallel to the highway, but is off the highway. And that's the only route into Silverton right now. North, so this also crosses into Region 10 in Virgil Turner's territory. So San Miguel Power and Electric is replacing their utility poles across Red Mountain Pass from Ouray. They have a substation about a couple miles north of Silverton. And on that, they're putting fiber on those poles now. So that gets the fiber to that substation just outside of Silverton, and then we need to connect it from that substation into Silverton. We should probably do that aerially via helicopter, but that line is owned by Tri-State. So I've been working with San Miguel Power and Electric to try to figure out how to do this in conjunction, since they'll have the helicopters and all of the infrastructure rolled out to be able to hang the fiber or get the poles up. They have to do that with a helicopter in this area.
And let's go ahead and for those of you who may not know, Antonio Martinez is the new executive director of the Colorado Broadband Office. And so we're thrilled to have Antonio directing us, leading us. So Antonio, do you want to say anything to the folks while Miriam and I look through the questions?
Absolutely. And I've met many of you already, and some of you, this will be my first time, but one focus that my boss, Tony Neal Graves, and all of our boss, the governor, have is to improve infrastructure in rural Colorado. I'm 5th generation from the San Luis Valley. That's Mount Blanca behind me. I love that. And we've got a lot of work to do. If nothing else that we learned during COVID-19, it was the haves versus the have-nots. And some schools were able to operate. continuously, and some schools had a very difficult time during the public health emergency. So the goal is really over the next several years to make sure that we're enhancing rural broadband infrastructure, and specifically, as Miriam just briefed, southwestern Colorado's infrastructure, which needs a lot of work. And we also have issues on the Eastern Plains and, of course, where I'm from in the Valley. So we're all going to be working together on this, and it's great to see what this COG has been able to do, and the fact that Miriam and her team have such a good view in terms of what's been done and what needs to be done. So I look forward to working with everybody to make things better for Colorado.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you.
We've been working with the San Luis Valley COG as well, especially across the Wolf Creek Pass, but because it crosses those COG boundaries. So Brian has a question about the southern route that we talked about, the Cortez, Shiprock, Farmington, Durango, and if we would work with Arcadian Infracom, who is building infrastructure from Phoenix to Denver through the Navajo Nation, Durango, Bayfield, Wolf Creek, and then up 285 after it goes to the valley. The answer is yes. Yes, I don't want to overbuild a large infrastructure provider. That seems silly, but we do need to connect to it. So we're working on the Cortez to Shiprock route or Tesnos Pass, either direction, to get to that Arcadian Infracom fiber on that side of the region to create that loop.
And Miriam, I'll take this next one. So what a lot of folks may or may not know is that the Colorado Broadband Office works with all the different regions and areas, municipalities, anything that is related to Colorado. And so we've got a question that says, have you had any conversations with Elon Musk organization, which is Starlink, about over in that area and the surrounding areas? I am the tribal liaison for the Ute Mountain Ute tribe and the Southern Ute Indian tribe. And our office has had those conversations. And anybody who is interested in that, we can get a meeting set up. We did a few months ago, we heard some encouraging words that this may be available in the Southwest region as soon as the fourth quarter of this year, and maybe the first quarter of 2022. So again, you can either reach out to Miriam and she'll get in contact with us, or reach out to me directly. You can find us on our website, which we'll reference once this Lunch and Learn's all done. Miriam, turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and Starlink is beta testing in this area. The way they do it, we're pretty far south compared to where their satellites are. So there's some beta testing going on, and I know a few people that have signed up. So we'll be excited to see and hear what those speeds are. And just so everybody knows that we talk about Starlink and all these low orbit satellites, that you have to have fiber backup on some of these because they have to go to a facility. So we still need that infrastructure on the ground, even if we're getting our internet from space. So
that's a good point. And what a lot of people don't understand too, if they haven't looked in depth into it, there are certain times during a day where you will not have service because of the way the satellites are revolving. So again, to Miriam's point, when the Colorado Broadband Office put out their report this last summer, we definitely believe that we need to have a robust fiber infrastructure, because all things, even if they're wireless, they do have to connect to a robust fiber network. And so that's why we keep pushing that message, and we'll continue.
And on top of that, so a lot of Southwest Colorado is economically driven by tourism, and we don't have rail into this area, which means that all of our goods are overland shipped. So as we move into the future of transportation, where we have automated vehicles or self-driving vehicles, all that takes fiber infrastructure because they're pushing so much data back and forth, they can't do it on a cellular network. Also, there are many areas in the state that doesn't have cellular connectivity, including a lot in Southwest Colorado. So as a key driver in our economy, we have to have that fiber in our roadways for our future transportation needs, including our tourism, and then also ensuring that our goods are at a reasonable price. Instead of having to have an individual drive a truck, we can then have our self-driving vehicles as expected. Because if we have to have a passenger truck or a truck being driven by a human, then those goods get way more expensive. There's a couple of questions about some of the funding at the state and federal level, and if we're paying attention and tracking that. I can't tell you how many webinars I've been to on all of this various funding through NTIA, working with the tribes to ensure that they get access to some of this information about that. And at this point in time, the money that was earmarked from the December stimulus package, the grant applications are not yet out. They're expected those to come out, I think, in April, and then we have a 90-day window to apply. The $300 million is for broadband that is not covered in other projects or other grant programs. I'm going to bring up my information on that. And so that's for rural infrastructure projects. It could be public-private, it could be for public only. And the state could apply for that, regions can apply for that, consortiums, things like that. So, and the digital inclusion efforts goes actually really well into ensuring that our citizens know how to use their equipment and how to access the internet and how to do it safely. And that way we can work on getting them more jobs for our under and unemployed individuals. Because we do have a high service sector employment base, which was hit very hard by the pandemic, as we all have talked about for a year now. So yes, we're paying very much attention to that. I work very closely with our state senator and our 2 senators in DC. Hopefully we get some funding. Keep all your fingers crossed, maybe your toes too, to get some funding to build infrastructure to help make this region more connected. What other questions are there? That it? Did I stun everybody? Maybe put them to sleep?
Sounds like you answered it so eloquently that everybody got it. Well, go ahead and put one more.
Ed, I'll jump in with a question.
Please.
This is Megan Gernert from the Colorado Broadband Office.
Megan.
Hey, Miriam. So could you talk a little bit more about how the infrastructure that you are building and putting together through IRUs can help support all of the hospitals and schools and the anchor institutions in the community, and then how you're working with service providers to access that infrastructure to serve the homes. I know you kind of covered that, but if you have anything a little deeper, dig deeper down that you want to say about it.
Yeah, so the SWCOG formed a healthcare consortium in 2018 to be able to apply for funding through USAC to get some of that middle mile work in, to be able to connect our healthcare agent organizations. That's some of our hospitals and then a lot of small clinics in the rural communities. And part of the problem is that the hospitals all have decent broadband service. Our clinics in some communities have broadband service, but none are connected to each other. So sharing of files and ensuring HIPAA compliance was really important. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to work on. And then with the schools, the same thing as of late of how do the schools connect their students when the students aren't in the building? And that has, as anybody who's worked on this for this last year, is a really hard nut to crack. The E-rate funding doesn't allow for the schools or libraries to broadcast that out until like just last month when the FCC changed some of those rules with the emergency broadband funding. So trying to figure that out, working with our wireless providers, as in our cellular providers, to work on hotspots for some of these school districts has been one of the other challenges. Because the hotspots are great, but it's really hard to run a household off of a hotspot. So that's kind of what we've been doing lately. Realistically, the middle mile infrastructure will support all of that is the goal. And then to get it into the communities. So the way in which the COG board has, back up a minute, the way in which the COG board has sort of designed or desired to do for the COG to engage in broadband is not to be an ISP. Trust me, I have no desire for that. And there are plenty of those out there, and I don't need to be one of them or involved with that. The is to build that middle mile, that backbone, that to allow the ISPs to get into the communities, to have another route in to that's affordable. Because right now, we only have a couple of ISPs that do middle mile work, and one of them is very unaffordable for some of the smaller local community-based ISPs to get to those communities to serve them in any sort of affordable fashion. And that's been a barrier for many years. So the goal, if we can do that, then the ISPs can build wireless off of it. They can build fiber into the neighborhoods and subdivisions along and the communities along the way, that type of thing. But because we have so many households that are not in a consolidated area or in any sort of close proximity to other households, there has to be a wireless overlay and solution for some parts of this region, because it's just unaffordable in so many ways to build fiber down a 20-mile long driveway to get to one house. And that's either for the landowner or the ISP. It's not affordable. So that's where we need a wireless overlay. It's a hybrid mix. There's not one solution that solves everything. Did I answer that, Megan?
Yeah, I think I like to hear, I like that you're saying it has to be a mix. There's a lot of people who are, you know, fiber only, but your region really emphasizes the fact that in some geographies, you just need to do whatever will work at a reasonable cost.
Yeah.
And there's so many people out in your region that are extremely remote and extremely hard to reach. And it's a very tough challenge, and I don't envy your position.
Thanks. That's okay.
But you're doing
you
a great job.
And give us pretty maps. So yeah. So everybody on the phone knows that, or on the call knows that I've worked with Megan since I've started at the COG, so like 7 years now. And Megan and the entire cast at OIT and CBO have been exceptionally helpful in giving us data, helping us with applications and sharing good information, connecting us with other folks. So.
All right, Miriam, we had one other question come in. Well, actually a couple. I guess I looked away real quick. First one is, are you aware of any similar organizations to yours that may operate in surrounding areas outside your direct influence?
Yes. And if it was up to me, they would be in my influence. No, I'm joking. So Region 10, which is the Council of Governments north of us, and they include, and I apologize to Virgil if I mess this up, they include San Miguel, Ouray, Hinsdale, Gunnison, Delta, and Montrose counties. And then there's the San Luis Valley Council of Governments to our east, and that's mostly the valley, but also includes, yeah, Hinsdale is, no, not Hinsdale, but Mineral. That's it. It includes Mineral as well as the rest of the valley for the most part. And they work on a little less in a slightly different capacity. So they're working closer with San Luis Valley Electric, which is providing services to the entire valley in their service area as well. We also work with Delta Montrose Electric Association, DMEA. and they serve that area in Region 10 as well. Northwest COG, which is the I-70 and High Mountain COG, essentially. Nate Wallowitz is their their broadband person, and they do a lot of work up there, a tremendous amount of work up there as well. I see one more about the RDOF funds, and this is geez, Brian, this is a tricky question. Yes, there's a large consortium. So I'm sure most of you on the call are aware of the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, which was an FCC auction for a wireless spectrum. And there was a large consortium of rural electric providers that bid on a good chunk of the country. Most of it was in the southeast of the country, east of the Mississippi. But they also bid on areas in Southwest Colorado and the West Slope and so there's hope that they are able to build out the infrastructure that is promised. There's a lot of concern that because there's no local engagement and the potential of not understanding the challenges out here, that it won't happen. One of the just for an anecdotal information, I went and looked up in a detailed map of what parcels they won, and it included the city park of Cortez, the park, and the wetlands around Cortez, of areas that they bid and won to connect homes to a wireless solution. Those two land plots have no homes. One is a park. So it does lead to some questions about what exactly and how we got to where we're at today. So.
And as we come to a close, anybody else have any questions? These have been great questions, and thank you for fielding those, Miriam.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Well, as we give everybody just a second to think about it, let me go ahead and kind of give our closing statement. Again, this is a function, the Lunch and Learn of the Colorado Broadband Office. And as you can see, we've got our website up. This website is all things broadband. And there's a lot of information contained in here, as well as you can find our Lunch and Learn series, video on demand, as some of the things that we've discussed about things like Project Thor, and the Bison Network. You can find our Lunch and Learns concerning those. And even after this session, we've recorded this session, and you'll be able to see Miriam's lovely face anytime you want. Just go in, video on demand, and you'll be able to see any materials that she provides for us.
And I'm going to stop my screen share because I don't think the viewers can see that.
Only I can see it then. That's excellent.
There you go.
There we go. So the Lunch and Learn, everything, your video on demand, you can see. You just go into I actually just go into the search function, type in Lunch and Learn, and then I can come in and I can go to any of the ones. Obviously today, the March Lunch and Learn, we will have all the information that'll be listed for this, as well as the video on demand. We have a great YouTube channel where you can find at least the history for about the last 6 or 7 years with the Colorado Broadband Office. And let's see, do we have any other questions? Hearing none, we want to thank Miriam. Miriam, we appreciate you at the Colorado Broadband Office. In light of COVID, I have not been able to travel down to the region like I used to. And Miriam has, she has really taken the reins and helped me with a lot of the projects that I work on. And so we appreciate your partnership. We thank you today for your presentation. And we look forward to hearing about all the great things you're doing in the southwest corner of the state.
Thanks, Ed. I can't wait until we can travel again and you can come down and we can see each other in person.
Exactly. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next month for our Lunch and Learn series.
Take care. Thank you.